Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest narration of the web series Wearing Power Armor to a Magic School. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 32, Bread. Dragonheart's Tower, Level 23, Residence 30, Thassia and Emma's bedroom, the tent. Local time, 0500 hours. Emma Booker. I fecked up, big time. And I had no one else but myself to blame. You know that feeling you get when you dive headfirst into a project that you had zero doubts would somehow work itself out in the end. This sudden surge of confidence that comes when you let the indomitable human spirit take the wheel. Well, that was me at 0300 hours when my eyes landed upon the hygiene module and pictured the inevitable outcome of a steaming hot shower after an entire day of non-stop grinding. I couldn't help myself but fall into the same trap as every other would-be DIYer. I couldn't stop the excitement, the sudden surge of energy, and the absolute hyperfixation that came with completing the project that promised nothing but endless positives, at the expense of some time and effort that would prove minimal in the grand scheme of things. And just like every would-be DIYer, I was this close to completing the task at hand, before finally reaching a roadblock that inevitably brought everything to a screeching halt. Final step. Referred to undesignated water source for attachment of intake pipe EIP23 to external pumping module EPM1. That's one final instruction decimated me, especially as I got that final step just shy of 0500 hours, when I finally had the entire damn module set up. Only to realize that I had missed out on the most vital pre-procedure checklist that I purposely skipped because I assumed it would be a non-issue. Environmental prerequisite: locate, evaluate, and secure a reliable water source. And that's why I only had myself to blame for this fiasco, because I'd assumed that the availability of a water source in the dorms would be an open and shut case. It only made sense for me to make that assumption, though, as I saw that Thassia had clearly used the dorm's ensuite to shower just the night before. It was because of that I didn't even bother checking the bathroom to begin with. I thought that whatever was in there could have easily fit the hypermodular fitting of the source intake pipe. Things couldn't have been further from the truth, however, as what I saw within the bathroom made me question the very fabric of my own reality. And within these four marble walls was nothing. Nothing but a series of dull flat marble surfaces and some strange wall fittings that looked like something out of a 21st century modern art exhibit. There was nothing here that resembled a tap, or even hinted at the fact that there was even any pipes carrying water behind those four bare walls. The only other thing of note here was an unseen light source keeping the bathroom lit. Aside from that, there was literally nothing else here. This meant that I had only one option available to me. The most logical and straightforward option of simply nudging the Avanar princess awake just so that I could ask where I could find a fucking tap. Whilst it was the most straightforward thing to do, I just couldn't get myself to do it. I thought about going up the stairs to nudge the avian awake, to then apologize profusely for disturbing her sleep, but given everything Thassia had done for me thus far, and considering the fact that I was the one responsible for almost all of the headaches that we're currently experiencing, it just felt wrong for me to disturb her at this hour. So I was left with an inconvenient truth of my circumstances and decided to just embrace the suck, toughing out the folly of my hubris, at least until morning came around. At that point, I could rest easily at actually asking the princess for pointers on the enigmatic machinations of the bathroom. Until then, I would sleep. And hopefully my short-sighted adventure would bear some fruit when morning rears its ugly head around. Dragon's Heart Tower, Level 23, Residence 30, Thassia and Emma's bedroom. Local time, 1000 hours. Emma Booker. Good news, half of my hard work actually paid off. Bad news, only half my work actually paid off. Upon waking up 3 hours later, forcing my carcass up and back into the suit, I'd managed to flag down Thassia just as she was getting out of bed. The princess's reaction to my questions were nothing short of politeness I expected from her, which managed to put me at ease as I was getting worried I was starting to get on her nerves with my constant flurry of questions. The bathroom turned out to be yet another demonstration of the Nexus' completely unhinged philosophies, as it relied entirely on a mana user's manipulation of the room to operate. Apparently, whoever designed this place took the whole concept of a modular, personalized room and just ran with it, making it so that every aspect of the room relied solely on the mana user to work, as they had to shape, form, and structure the otherwise blank slate before use. This was supposedly done so that the room could be made to fit the precise criterion of a person's liking. To me, however, it just felt like another bizarre concept pulled straight out of the Nexus's seemingly endless idea pool of zany, overkill, and mana-addled solutions to problems that sort of existed. Thankfully, the bathroom didn't require constant intervention from the mana user to operate, as certain elements could be permanently turned on. This included the water mains, which I immediately hooked the pipes up to, as the mana containment water was quickly siphoned into a series of filtration units, all with the express purpose of extracting and removing every ounce of mana present within the water. The process took about 2 hours to do, but by the end of it, I was rewarded for all my troubles by one of the best showers I've ever had. All of the stress, even the constant ticking of the bomb which constantly gnawed at the back of my mind, seemed to fade away for a few short minutes, as the warm water washed everything away. But that about wrapped up the good news. The bad news, however, came in the form of a little MRED experiment from the previous night. As I opened the triple airlocked compartment on my side of the tent, I was met with what could only be described as food in name and aesthetics alone. The soft, white, fluffy loaf of bread had literally become a baton, whilst the pancakes were now more reminiscent of mini frisbee that cracked and crumbled the moment I laid my fingers on them. My immeasurable disappointment grew the longer I stood there next to the MRED, and the longer I stared at the small stack of dust that was once perfectly cooked stack of pancakes. Beyond this, however, I could feel a bit of anxiety seeping in, as the results of the experiment did make me a bit anxious as to the long-term food security of this mission. Then again, I should have expected this result. It was the first calibration test after all. I should have expected this, shouldn't I? I spoke to no one in particular, but quickly garnered the attention of the Eevee, who remained within the power armor that currently stood imposingly just a few feet away from me. That is correct, Cadet Booker. As you are already aware, the MRED is designed with multiple calibration protocols in effect, which correspond to the type and densities of the foodstuffs to be desaturated. In addition to this, the systems are designed to test the maximal extraction threshold against the subjective palatability gradient, with the food safety variable as an integral aspect of the tests. Thus, the first round of extraction procedures dictate that the MRED will attempt maximal extraction settings in order to both stress test the components and systems, as well as to garner data on the mana extraction process at a maximal setting. I blinked rapidly upon hearing Eevee's explanation being blasted from my suit's speakers. It felt somewhat jarring turning around to face my armor talking to me, but then again, I should have expected it, as I'd yet to set up any other speaker system within the tent for it to speak through. I know, Eevee. They already ran everything by me during the briefings, though I would be lying if I didn't say that I sort of hoped that putting the food under the blast for 7 hours would have somehow miraculously resulted in something edible. I managed out with a sigh. Cadet Booker, it is logical to assume that since the extraction of mana from both the food and water is indeed viable, that the only point of contention is now the palatability of foodstuffs rendered through the MRED. Yeah, well, I trailed off and I began tapping on the loaf of bread that sounded like styrofoam when I hit it against the armor. I think you and I have different definitions of palatable. I am confident that the mana extraction process can be optimized, Cadet Booker. It is at this point that I must ask that you assess the palatability of designated foodstuffs marked Consumable Group A Item 1 for the purpose of data gathering and analysis. The AI spoke in a no-nonsense fashion, as I turned around, giving it a look of utter incredulity. You want me to try eat this? I shot back, tapping the styrofoam bread for added effect. I require data on palatability of foodstuff A1 bread, as it is a subjective dataset relying entirely on the input of human subject. The AI continued. I couldn't help but shudder at that last line, especially how it was delivered. Popular media back home was currently going through another AI apocalypse phase, with a lot of movies, both immersive and traditional, diving deep into the uncomfortable topics of human-AI relations post-AI takeover. Being stuck in a bare white tent, with a monotone, somewhat disgruntled-sounding VI, talking to me through a suit of armor several heads taller than me, all the while suddenly referring to me as subject really wasn't doing my movie-binging gremlin brain any favors. I hesitated for a few seconds, tentatively staring at the bread, then the armor, then back at the bread again, before finally just going for it. Crunch. It did not end well. Cadet Booker, I did not require that you actively consume the foodstuff to consider inedible or uncomfortable eating. I merely needed a dataset for the purpose of the experiment, even if the dataset is a refusal to consume the foodstuff in question. I stared back at the VI with unamused eyes and a mouthful of hardtack, currently turning my mouth into a Sahara desert.
Damn it, Evie,
I managed out with a mouthful of bland, stale bread before reaching for the water dispenser, which thankfully still had some mana-free water inside it. Shall I log A wine down as unpalatable then, Cadet? The AI spoke, with a hint of disappointment in its voice. Though, I was probably just imagining the actual tone in its voice. Projection was a heck of a thing after all. Yes, and make sure that you clarify your intent next time, I snapped back as I finished up what limited bits of housekeeping I needed to do for now. Which included punting the balled-up undersuit into the washer, getting the wash and dry cycle started, before grabbing a fresh undersuit from the cargo airlock and quickly putting it on. I guess the next test with the MRED includes extracting mana at a slow, sustained rate. I spoke as I began recalibrating the different electronic components within the undersuit. Correct, Cadet Booker, provided of course that the foodstuffs are in similar type and contain similar properties to Group A. Acknowledged, I responded promptly, shuddering a bit as the haptic feedback finished its calibration cycles. All right then, we got a lot of work ahead of us, so let's get going. System status SRR? I asked as per protocol, steadying my hand on the suit's backpack. Diagnostics running, pending, all systems nominal. Cadet Booker, status ready for standard operations. Operator acknowledges system status after pre-mission diagnostics, I replied dryly, and with a few final breaths, I pulled myself back into the armor. Current objectives, preferably the ones I listed before dozing off last night, I continued, as my eyes quickly readjusted to the constant assault on the sensors that was the HUD. Priority objectives, locate and secure Container 10, current time remaining until activation of the denial of sensitive assets to unauthorized parties protocols, 36 hours. 34 minutes and 47 seconds. All right then, let's pay a visit to our dear old friend. Hopefully she's alive and lucid enough to get us to the bottom of this little predicament. Dragon's Heart Tower, level 23, resident 30, Dacia and Emma's bedroom, local time 10:20 hours. Emma Booker. Transitioning from the tent to the marble and cobblestones world of the academy was always jarring. Opening those external protective flaps to reveal something that wasn't more bare white paneling and drab grey composite would probably be something I'd need to get used to. I got into the swing of things quick enough, as I was met with the likes of Dacia, who was busy reading on one of the many ornate seats that formed the mini living room in our loft. Was the water to your liking, Emma? Dacia asked with a clack of her beak. I managed to squeeze in a couple minutes' worth of shower, so that's a win in my book, I beamed out. But with a constant stream of filtered water filling up my reservoirs now, I should be able to get something more substantial later tonight. The princess nodded slowly. The lengths to which you need to go just to attain what we take for granted on a daily basis is quite remarkable, Emma. It is what it is, Dacia, I shrugged in response. The very air I breathe needs to be filtered. This whole world, or heck, even your worlds, are actively hostile to human life. These measures are something that are cumbersome and seriously draining to deal with, but it is necessary. Besides, it's not as if these measures are something new where I come from. My people have had a history of intrepid explorers, brave pioneers, and foolish thrill-seekers who all surge forward into inhospitable domains just so that they can crest the next wave or see what's over the next hill. I paused for a moment as I was tempted to strike a pose, but quickly decided against it. I'm just furthering a legacy that's already been established, or at least I'm hoping I'm doing that right. Heck if I know if I'm actually doing things right. 9 times out of 10, I feel like I'm just making the best of my situation. I can't say that I understand the appeal of this legacy of actively seeking hostile domains, Dacia responded with an equal mix of curiosity and genuine concern. And I do not know what manner of civilization would result from such a culture, though I do harbor a morbid curiosity to inquire further. However, I can most certainly resonate with your latter statements, Emma. Half of the court politics I contend with simply amounts to making do with the hand that you've been dealt, of making best of one's situation, and doing whatever it is in your limited scope and power to maintain life, security, and perhaps some waning semblance of your own personal liberty. It's a great game, where doubt comes naturally as a result of being a player and not the host. There was a small pause that followed Thasia's response, as one point in particular caught my attention more than any other. It was unfortunate that it was so topical as well, given how if things had turned out any differently, this conversation would have moved right into an hours-long exchange of life and culture. Thasia mentioning the concept of the great game immediately brought me back to the conversation with Eleanor the previous night. "Thasia, would you mind if I consulted you on something?" I began, as our gears in my head began turning now at the first major issue of the day. The princess seemed to catch on as she leaned forward in her seat intently and nodded. "By all means. Something happened last night at the workshop, and it wasn't anything to do with the armorer, though we can talk about that later." I took a deep breath as I shelved that topic for another time. "Did you happen to pay any attention to Eleanor's whereabouts after I left for the workshop?" "Not particularly, no. Lord Ruler, Eleanor, had seemingly remained in his room until Thelman and I retired to our respective rooms. After that, I simply have no recollection of anything beyond my own domicile." "Well, Eleanor followed me to the workshop," I stated plainly, pausing for a moment to gauge Thasia's reaction, of which there really was none, as she managed to keep that signature poker face that was probably second nature to her by now. "And I am assuming, since you managed to uncover this, that his meddling had failed in some way or shape or form," Thasia shot back coolly. "Correct. However, here's where things get complicated. I'll save the bulk of the events for later. But long story short, that discount kobold decided to use some sort of projection spell to spook me just as I was in the middle of the weapons inspection with the armorer. And the projection used wasn't just something a random monster or anything. He purposely chose to bring out a carbon copy version of the null." Thasia's face shifted at that, which, given how difficult it was to face her, probably meant her mind was going through the full implications of this revelation. I pressed on as Thasia urged me to continue with a single nod. "Well, I shot it and no, nobody was hurt. Fast forward to a chase sequence later, and the armorer eventually managed to corner and capture Eleanor. However, when we pressed him for answers about why he was there to begin with, well, I think it'll be better for you to see for yourself." It was with this that I brought out my datapad and began replaying the relevant scenes for Thasia to see, starting from the brief spats between Eleanor and the armorer, all the way to my confrontation with the diminutive lizard. Thasia's gaze remained completely transfixed. She did flinch a bit when the footage finally went over my dealings with the lizard, and Eleanor's sudden shift in persona as I pulled out the library card and began talking his language. Yet, despite being inundated with the sudden flood of information, with a completely unexpected tangent, she soon responded coolly and without much in the way of delay. "This complicates matters," she began slowly. "This entire situation calls for a complete re-evaluation of the dynamics of this peer group and how we need to approach Lord Rule." "Eleanor," Thasia promptly corrected herself before continuing. "There's a great number of layers to this unexpected development, each of which hints at a greater game being played here, and points at the fact and that there are a great number of interested parties beyond just Eleanor." The princess took a moment to let out an exasperated coo, her eyes finally moving from the tablet and back to me. "You must understand as well as I that Eleanor's actions do not constitute a scheme of his own making, correct?" "That I do," I nodded simply. "The fact that he's even bothering to do this in the first place is outside of his whole I'm above you persona. I'm not sure if that same rings true here. But where I come from, becoming a spook is not something that most people in high and mighty positions would ever stoop down to. Besides, I think we have a lead. I don't think a student would actively defer a bit of punishment from a low-level administrator in order to fast-track it to our highest authorities if they weren't in cahoots with them." "This coincides with my observations of these developments as well, Emma," Thasia responded with that resonant chirp. "To add to this, his knowledge of the null is most certainly not circumstantial, and considering that he was absent from our adventures the previous day, his knowledge of this creature would hint to either feeding off information via a higher benefactor, or a direct observation of our activities from afar. Either way, this does not bode well." This leads me to what I wanted to consult you on, Dacia. If Eleanor's out there waiting for us right now, would it be best if we confronted him outright in front of Thalman or— No, Dacia interjected sharply, and with a certainty that was almost uncharacteristic for her. Confronting Eleanor out in the open, in front of others not privy to you and the Venurian's current game, would be an outright suicide to the dialogue that you've managed to broker with him the previous night. You've managed to prove yourself as not just another pawn, but a player in the game, at least in Eleanor's eyes. It would be wise to maintain that momentum, Emma. By continuing this line of dialogue with him in private, there is a higher likelihood the Venurian will divulge more information as he speaks to you frankly, beyond what his current facade will allow. This is now a matter between you and the Venurian, as Thalman and I are not privy to these political transactions. I couldn't help but to mimic the princess by gripping my forehead as well as letting out a sigh as dread of the complex court politics had begun seeping in faster than I expected. That shouldn't be too hard. I'll just let that situation slide for now. Make sure not to mention my dealings with Eleanor when he's around, and focus instead on our other problem. It's not like we have a shortage of other things to worry about after all. I sighed sharply. That is an acceptable plan, Dacia responded promptly, as she stood up and began straightening out her uniform. Right then, shall we proceed? Dragon's Heart Tower, level 23, residence 30, living room, local time 10:25 hours. Emma Booker. As we exited the bedroom, we were once more met with a similar sight reminiscent of the previous days, as there on the couch were the bickering pair that had seemed to have carried over their arguments from the previous night. Except this time, the context seemed to have thankfully shifted to something new. Every minute I waste in this room for the sake of this elf realmer is another minute that I grow increasingly more famished. It is unbecoming of a noble to sit in waiting for a commoner. In fact, it should be the other way around. Or perhaps this is yet another one of your Havenbrookian forms that test Nexus's patience, Prince Thalman. I could hear Eleanor snapping at Thalman just as we made our way into the living room proper. Thalman amazingly resisted responding in kind as he got up as soon as we made our way towards the pair. We were waiting for you both, but it should be fine. We would miss the breakfast. There is always a la carte menu we can. I have met the criterion of your unlawful detainment necessary. Thus, I shall take my leave. Eleanor promptly jumped off of the couch and began trotting his way over to the door. His little legs were clearly attempting to generate some sort of forceful series of thumps as he did so, but only resulted in a light series of taps given his diminutive size. Hold on a minute there, that wasn't our agreement. You agreed to— I agreed to wait for the Earthrealmer and the Tainted One. I have no other reason to be here. Now I must resume my extracurriculars. You lot can do whatever it is you're up to. I'll be having none of it. Eleanor turned to face the Lupinar one final time before slamming the door shut and skittering off. This made things so much simpler as it meant that we were clear for now. I am sorry, Princess. Thalman turned to face Dacia. I thought that we might be able to squeeze something out of him yet, but the Venurian continues to be as squirmy as a prairie rodent. It's quite all right, Thalman, Dacia began, as she turned towards me as if to confirm whether or not I wanted her to proceed on my behalf, to which I did. There are a few matters we must address regarding Eleanor, which I suggest we do over a short breakfast, as we have even more pressing matters following this. After a reluctant pause, the Lupinar prince nodded in agreement, leading to both of us sitting down. Alert, localized surge of mana radiation detected, 275% above background radiation levels, and a privacy screen being brought down soon after. So shall we speak about this over a brunch platter? The Transgration Academy for Magical Arts en route to the Healing Wing, local time 10:50 hours. Emma Booker. Thalman's reactions were nothing short of what I expected. There was absolute outrage, followed by an unrepentant series of growls, capped off with barks of seething anger at the same clips I played for Dacia earlier. The mercenary prince was perhaps even more uncomfortable than I was at my entry into this game, as it was clear Thalman, despite his noble heritage, wasn't really one to dabble in it at all. I am telling you, Emma, this is a dangerous path forward. Are you certain that you are making a wisest choice? He spoke once again, continuing the conversation from earlier. Underneath yet another privacy screen Dacia was maintaining as we approached the medical wing. I don't like it either, Thalman. There is nothing more I hate than playing politics. But it is unfortunately a pill I have to swallow if we're going to get to the bottom of the issues surrounding Illinois. I overheard you guys arguing late into the night. I really don't think confronting him normally is going to get us anywhere. The Lupinor let out a sigh of defeat at that, as he lowered his head in my general direction. I can't fault your logic, Emma. Perhaps speaking his language, as you put it, would bring us some resolution to this frankly irritating problem. However, the Lupinor's voice lowered, just as we were about to reach the doors of the healing wing proper. I know how these games work, Emma. It is dangerous, so make sure you tread lightly, and just know that I, as part of your peer group, am here to support you should the need arise. The prince reassured me with a smirk as we pushed past the double doors and into the magical wing proper. Or at least, that's what I thought, as we entered what looked to be a massive circular room with multiple branching hallways connected to it, like spokes on a wheel. In typical academy fashion, however, the room really wasn't all that modest with its size, as it went up a solid 20 or so stories, with high pillars piercing straight up into the marble-lined rotunda and moving murals painted on it like some grand cathedral. Between these pillars were little outcroppings where several gargoyles were perched. Gargoyles, which I swear were looking straight at us. Alert, localized surge of mana radiation detected 425% above background radiation levels. My gut was proven right, as it only took a few seconds after our entry for these stony beasts to come to life, with multiple bursts of mana radiation accompanying what could only be described as the sounds of crackling concrete. Soon enough, several large gargoyles made harsh, heavy landings right in front of us. The two closest to us held out their arms before zapping two stony spears into existence, crossing them in a clear display to stop us from going any further. "Halt!" a voice commanded from above, as a shadowy figure landed right in front of the two gargoyles blocking our path. The figure's face was hidden underneath an unnatural shadow casted by his hood, revealing two trapezoidal lights where his eyes should be. "The healing wing is currently off limits to visitors, so state your ailment or leave where you came from," the voice boomed, echoing through the large open space, as all eyes within the room now landed squarely on us. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, HenryTheRed, Casper Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.